First for the May 28th, 2024. This is a meeting that was changed. We moved it from the 22nd. And we have a number of significant items to discuss. We are here as citizens of Harpswell by ourselves. And I asked for this because I wanted to have sort of an unvarnished discussion about where you think we are in this process and what you think needs to be done to get us to the finish line. I expect that we'll be asked by the select board to meet and give them some feedback because there are some decisions that have to be made, not the least of which is, in addition to a timeline, information that would impact funding of viewshed for the foreseeable future until we finish. So I'd like to start by taking a look and asking everybody to kind of think about the recent meetings that we've had, the feedback that we've got. We had 3 meetings, obviously, in different parts of the town. We had the large meeting at the school. So that was sort of nicely, I think, compressed by Viewshed into an email that was put out to everybody on the 14th of May. But I'd like to just kind of start this dialogue by asking everybody, what do you think you've heard, and what does that tell you about where we are with respect to the plan?
We start with me. I think one of the biggest problems we had, unfortunately, is the attainable housing. It has taken over every one of the meetings. We tried to stay focused on what we're trying to deal with, but our little group, that's what all the questions are about.
Yeah,
We seem stuck on that.
yeah.
In hindsight, if I had to do over again, it would be a footnote in the comp plan.
How's everybody else feel?
I think that and the mixed use, just the whole future land use plan is where we always seem to get stuck on.
Yeah.
I think also as we were going forward with the meetings, water kept coming up as an issue in every section that we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think from the perspective of the Conservation Commission, we feel we've heard that we have to start now to start doing some things to address specifically to the residents so that they can start to absorb what is needed to be figured out as we go forward. And we are planning to start putting on some programs within the next 6 months or so, directed to the public to address some of the issues. And Kevin's got a call into the hydrologist, the
Ryan
state
Gordon.
hydrologist. And we're hoping to maybe pull something together with that, which we started to work on. But I've heard so much in every area that people are worried about water, and it seems that until we at least address it a little bit and give some direction of what we know and what we can do, it'll come up in everything we try to do.
Other comments?
Well, I've been a little startled at how negative a lot of the reactions have been. And it feels like that's an easier way to respond to this than to support things.
Yeah.
It happened last time, or maybe the time before that, the comp plan, maybe 25 years ago. There was a big pushback on a bunch of items. It failed. Went back to the drawing board, maybe 30 years ago.
I think that's what you're gonna get though, is you're either gonna get a lot of negative or a lot of positive. The people that could care less either way aren't gonna come out and say anything, you know what I mean? And the people that really, really like it are gonna come out and tell you, this is really awesome, you know, I love all these great things. And then you're just gonna have the people that nitpick the bad stuff. You know, unfortunately with stuff like that, I think those are just the only types of people that we are gonna hear from.
I think that there was some negativity. I think more than negative, a lot of the comments which you might think are negative were more anxiety. And we partly are responsible for that, partly because we produced this tome. People look at something that big
Yeah.
and, you know, they just say, whoa, 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 talk to me in plain English, what is this? And the other thing is, we kept passing out these damn tables with all these square footage on them. And the fact that the discussion's focused on land use is not surprising, because in fact, the pass-outs, the maps on the easels, everything we did encouraged them to think about land use, not to treat it as, and I think we need to address that. I think it's more than presentation, I could get into that, but anyway, that's my quick take.
Yeah, I mean, early on in the process, in the first year, 18 months or whatever, we got a lot of feedback on housing.
Yeah.
I mean, and the affordable housing group was ramping up and so on and so forth. And that sort of took on a life of its own. And, you know, when I looked at the plan, Viewshed organized the plan based on the number of inputs that they got early in the process. And housing came up as one of the top areas that was discussed. Ironically, later, as we had more of these meetings later on in the process, that was not the case. So, I mean, I understand why the initial draft was organized that way, but, you know, I just have to think that if we looked at this town, housing is not the number one issue that the town is gonna face in the next 15 years. I mean, it's an important issue, and it has to be addressed in some fashion. And a lot of people are, you know, have a lot of strong feelings about it. But if you really look at the history of the town and what the town is all about, it's the waterfront, it's the activity that happens on the water, commercial fishing, recreation, and so on. And then it's natural resources, it's including potable water, and how do we preserve the beauty of this place and accommodate as many people as we possibly can. And that's where housing comes in at some point. But the way we've organized this plan, to me, we start off and we talk about housing, and then we talk about other things after that. It gives the impression that housing is the number one thing that we're all looking at. I mean, I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but.
Well, I think it's been our focus because, I mean, I think there are about half of us who disagree with the proposal as it stands. And it's complicated, and so we've been going around and round on it. The other thing somebody mentioned, and Judy wrote down here, is, you know, what 200 people at a meeting, are you gonna base your decisions on those 200? And that we sort of get a different makeup of people in the various meetings, so.
You know, I think, yeah, I looked at that, it's more than 200, because the Affordable Housing Working Group conducted their own surveys and stuff like that, and they got a lot of feedback. But when you have a survey that focuses on one thing, you know, that's what you get back. You get comments about that one thing. And what we're trying to do is say, how does that fit into the totality of what this town is all about?
But the people who attended, especially, I think that first public meeting or so, that was at the school, that was a big issue. So.
Right, and that's
I
why,
think we concluded, oh, that's a big issue.
you know, that's why Viewshed, you know, put the spotlight on it initially. Okay, so, that said, what can we do to,
Before we go on, I'm pretty sure we're all in agreement that there's no perfect comprehensive plan.
Right.
Not everyone's always gonna get everything they want. And if we want the plan to pass, I think the goal should be for the majority of the people to get most everything they want. To people to read the plan and say, well, there's a few things, but the major issues are intact, and I can go along with that. And that way, I think the plan will pass. But if we don't make some changes to the mixed use and the affordable housing and the land use and the stuff that we heard, and we advertise it differently and bring it back, people are gonna look at it and say, you didn't really make any changes, you're just changing the way you're presenting it. So, and then, you know, we're setting ourselves up for failure, basically putting lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig, you know? So,
Hey,
we
yeah,
we need to
Maureen.
make the changes.
I'm sorry, George.
No, that's it, I'm done.
You know, the people, and they did do this, they look at those yellow areas and say, well, why is this here? And, you know, I've driven the ones, well, both of them, but I went down all the roads in South Harpswell. It doesn't make any sense, just, I think, as it didn't make sense for initially Sam Alexander's farm to be part of a yellow. And people will look at that and just say, well, this doesn't make any sense. The other thing I want to mention is, I kind of worry that, are we in opposition to what the Attainable Housing Committee is doing versus all these suggestions for lot size and house size?
Well, the way I look at, I mean, I'm glad Mark is here because he's been plugged into that and leading kind of the attainable housing effort for a long time. But, I mean, I think if we look at what they're proposing, there are a lot of good ideas that they're proposing, you know. And I think in terms of the town, let's take a look at what would be acceptable to the most number of people. In my view, it's doing things to make ADUs more doable. And that would involve changing maybe some ordinances. It also makes sense to me to focus on structures, large houses that might be candidates to split up into a couple of units. And in those ways, you can make attainable housing for people more of a reality. Where we obviously got into problems was, okay, smaller lots, smaller houses, and then people start thinking about, okay, well, what's this gonna do to all this open space that we have, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, personally, I think we can embrace several aspects of the attainable housing thing, attainable housing report and recommendations. And I think a lot of people would say, yeah, okay, that's good, because it's not changing the way Harpswell looks. It's not really impacting the way our infrastructure or our natural resources are being used and so on. And then these other challenges that we have in terms of making smaller houses and so on. I mean, I think it's been clear to me that before anybody would bite off on that, they want to have I wouldn't say a full-blown study of water and so on and so forth, what's really available in the town and what, is there a limit? We didn't do that for obvious reasons. It's expensive, and, you know, we weren't given a budget to do anything like that. And when you look at it practically, it's not like we're gonna discover some big aquifer that we can tap into and so on.
See, I think part of the reason we focused on housing, see, there's nothing we can do about the water, frankly, as I understand it, and the state hydrologist has basically told us that. And all the surveys in the world aren't gonna help that process very much. There's no magic survey that'll say, oh, we can, we now
Yeah.
have better carrying capacity by 20% or something. So part of the problem is water, and I think what Mary Ann was getting at in her was, we've got to learn how to mediate. We've got to learn how to install rain barrels and cisterns and all sorts of stuff. I mean, that's how we deal with the water problem, but not by more surveys necessarily. I want to speak, I think the housing is important, and we have to be clear. I think it's a quality of life issue. If this town, in the next 10 years, increasingly, it's already a fact, I think, but I haven't seen the numbers on it. If first responders, teachers, people who provide high-end services can't live in this town, we really will become a retirement thing with some fishing folks hanging on by their fingernails, hoping for the best. So I think the housing actually is a very important issue, and I think we haven't got it right. And I think that the key to it, and I go back to the anxiety business, our report needs to focus on recommending some processes for the next 10 years to really resolve and carry forward these issues, and not think we're going to come up with the answers here. But to say that to set up a process so people can say, oh, that's a fair process. I'm cool with that. And I accept the idea, and we should say clearly, here are the 5 priorities: working waterfront housing, rural character, water, a couple more. And we should state very clearly that's what it is. And where we have clarity, we should say, and here's what we think can be done. And where we don't have clarity, we should be honest about it and say, here are some qualities of how the discussion should move forward on housing, I think, because I don't think this makes any sense, frankly. And if we pursue this and think we can tinker with the numbers, we're just gonna, it'll just get, it's a rat trap. But if we can do a good process, people will relax.
Amy?
I want to just go back to the issue of anxiety. There's a lot of things that are making a lot of us anxious these days. One of the things that I think we really rely on as a community here is just something that's really hard to measure about being and living in Harpswell. It's peaceful, you know your neighbor, but you don't know your neighbor because your neighbor lives a stone's throw away. You know your neighbor because you can't see your neighbor's house. There's open space. As soon as you cross from Brunswick and you go past American Egan Farm, you kind of have a sense of, I'm coming into this different place. And why is that? It's because there's open space there. It's like, that's your living room when you come into Harpswell, and it's this farm. And that sets the tone for the town. What's happening on 123 right now is it's getting chopped up bit by bit by bit by these 40,000 square feet houses. And if that's what has to happen, that's okay. But that's going to change the way you enter into Harpswell. It's going to alter things. But maybe that's just what has to happen. But getting back to this anxiety, I think people know that things are changing, but they don't have confidence that it's going to make things better. They have confidence that it will make things worse, or that it will make things harder. And I don't think in the plan that we did a good job of saying, we understand what you really love about this community, and here's what we're going to do to help protect what you love about the community. I don't think that we did a good job of that. I don't think we convinced people that we really understood where their hearts lay about Harpswell. And I know that's touchy-feely and blah, 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 blah. But I think it makes a real difference. And so I think we need to touch on traffic, groundwater, and it's, as someone said, data, data, data. It's okay to do a, you know, a sort of a process of how we're going to deal with groundwater, but I think you have to have the information there, as much as you can get. Same goes with the fishing community, same goes with other natural resources. So, and business, you know, are we going to promote any kind of business? Are we gonna promote small business? Do we wanna have a bank on the corner of Mountain Road? I have a video of the corner market on opening day and the traffic on that road. And people trying to come up from Mountain Road and trying to go down 123 and come out of that driveway. And it was opening day, so everybody was there and wanted to go, but I've seen that a lot. So I just think we haven't quite captured the essence of why we are all here and how we're going to try to keep what's good and roll with the punches and, you know, what we can't avoid.
Matt?
I think everybody's kind of hit the nail on the head here with what they've said so far, and kind of carrying off what Amy just said. Harpswell's always been nice because Harpswell's a pretty simple place, you know, we're not the hustle and bustle of Brunswick and stuff. And what Bob was saying, we have this giant, great big, complicated, comprehensive plan for a simple place. We gotta simplify this because we're a simple place. This is way too complicated. I think we need to simplify the plan. And to get to the housing thing, I feel it's kind of like the water thing. We live in a free market society. I'll be the first to admit I was shit lucky to get a house here. I mean, that's the only way I did it. I was lucky. Sometimes you need luck in life. I would love for this to be a more affordable community. But it's a free market. We can't dictate how much somebody's gonna sell their house for. All we can do is control lot sizes and stuff like that. But when we start reducing lot sizes, we start making it more complicated. That takes away from the simplicity. I think we have to be realistic in what we have the ability to do and not do. We don't have the ability to magically make more water. We don't have the ability to magically make somebody sell their house for half as much as they think it's worth. The market controls that. So I guess what I'm getting at is, I think we're overcomplicating something that can be very simplified. I don't know how to do that. That's what we need to figure out as a committee, I guess, but I think that's where our problem is lying. That's where the anxiety is coming from. I think that's where the pushback's coming from. I think what was the old plans? I didn't read it, but I looked at it.
It was pretty close.
It was pretty close.
You look at other comp plans from other towns, they all look alike.
But other towns are not Harpswell. We're
No.
unique.
No,
And-
but you take West Bath, there's about the same size. They're doing one right now. Who else? Wiscasset's doing one.
I think one of the good ways that we could even reduce the size of that, maybe not make it so overwhelming with people, is we have kind of two sections. You know, there's the data section and then the plan section. Maybe if we just had kept them separate, you know, and when people saw the comp plan, you know, I don't know where the plan part ends, but we'll call it half of that, you know, it's not nearly as overwhelming. You know, and then you have your separate, well, this is where all this information comes from, your data sets, for lack of better terms, as a completely separate document. Because that's something, I don't think we got any comments. I looked through them, I couldn't really find more than maybe one or two on the data that Viewshed and the committee collected. You know, that's something that nobody can dispute. You know, it's black and white, you know. So separate that, get rid of that, and just focus on the plan itself, and that alone will simplify it a lot, you know, or at least make it look simpler.
Matt, I think in the last plan, it's the same thing, this big, but you have this section, which I think we're now calling the executive summary, is what they are handing out. You do need the other part later, when you get into
Yeah,
implementation,
Right.
to have the details of how to move forward.
Well, I think people don't need to see that really, you know what I
Maybe
mean?
not,
Like,
yeah.
I think we can do a better job with an executive summary, and we heard that in some of the comments.
Yeah.
You know, that people wanted it summarized better than it was, and I think that's kind of what I took from that, is they felt overwhelmed. I think that's where a lot of that anxiety felt from. I mean, I'm not trying to take away from it, because that's an amazing, huge piece of work that this committee has created. It is good, but for somebody looking from the outside in that hasn't been a part of this, that's a lot. You know, that's overwhelming.
Taking from what you said, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Amy? Were you just going to say?
No, go for it, I'll go after you.
We're simpler. I'm wondering, it seems to me we have to figure out how to solve the problem from what the people are asking us. And even what we have there, if we back up and make it simple, we don't go into as much detail on future land use.
Yeah.
Maybe, we have an interior zone now that pretty much can do everything that we were talking about. We back up and do little things like, I think the affordable housing has mentioned as well. You put in some changes to the ordinance that allows you to accept some of these, put things in place to help with affordable housing.
Right, I think you can, the topics can be more broad.
Broadly and trying to reach out, we're hearing you because we also know it's not only the elder people that we're talking about housing, it was also the younger people. And all in all, we want to be a vibrant community, not of one age group. And maybe that's a way that we can reach out to everybody, and by simplifying it a little bit and not taking any one area of town and saying, we're going to do this to your area. I think that,
I had hoped to have copies of what you should put together available to look through tonight.
I happen
maybe
to
some
have
people-
it.
For-
Yeah, I have it here.
Yeah.
Would you like it?
But unfortunately, I couldn't get the right administrative support over the holiday weekend to make it happen. But, you talk about simplifying and so on, I think that's good. On the other hand, I heard a lot of people saying, where's the data? How can you recommend all this stuff without having data? For example, talking about water and so on and so forth. How can you talk about maybe putting more houses in Harpswell without laying out exactly whether our water system as it exists right now can support it? So I mean, when you look at what was discussed, I won't say it's all over the map, but I think it kind of captures the difficulty that we're having to come up with a coherent plan, because people are coming at it from a lot of different directions and saying a lot of different things, and it's tough to know, where ground truth is on all these things. But I do think, just to kind of capture things here, I do think that if we, first of all, I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I mean, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
No.
And I do think that if we made some changes, organizational changes in how the information's presented, I do think that will make a difference in how people interpret and embrace whatever the plan is all about. And I also think that, while, when you look at the future land use plan, what really spun people up was when we started to get very specific about areas where we could have, town-on land in Dowdy Point, Mitchell Field, the mixed-use plan in southern, off of West Harpswell, and the southern part of West Harpswell, and so on and so forth. That got people very spun up because they were very specific recommendations. So I'm wondering if a better approach would be to say, because we're not recommending that any one area is gonna be a growth area for this town, we've all agree, I think, it has to be kind of distributed throughout the town in some fashion. If we are not as specific about drawing out these individual districts like we have, and coming up with a more generalized approach to say, we want to look at taking advantage of ADUs, we want to take a look at taking advantage of houses that can be divided into multiple units and so on. And then take the approach to say, before we start talking about, multiple or what's the, I keep forgetting this part of. Before we start talking about smaller houses on smaller lots and so on, that we kind of caveat by saying that we need to understand exactly what our water situation is, and then take a look on a case-by-case basis at where maybe things like this might make sense in the town. I don't know, I'm not sure if you think it's a cop-out to do that, or.
No,
I think that's a much better
I
way.
think it's,
Thank you.
I think that's, in my view, that's treating this more as a vision statement than as a detailed plan.
Yeah,
And I think a vision statement, people can agree with,
yeah,
as long as they know how the details are going to be worked out. So the Affordable Housing Group, for instance, recommended we have a housing commission or something like that.
We did too.
That would propose detailed ways to
Yeah.
implement the vision, and not try and get the implementation into this plan, because that's getting into details, and then we get lost in the
being a
weeds.
bit more general rather than more.
And I like
Yeah.
Matt's idea about separating the chapters, the inventory chapters, from the sort of
Yeah.
central plan, the
I'll be back to my
key vision
footnote about the
statement.
Attainable Housing Committee.
Yeah.
It's
I
been
know
months.
the attainable housing is gonna meet tomorrow, is that right, Mark?
Twice.
twice.
But also, I mean, I've had a
You
couple
only have to meet
of
with them once.
email exchanges with Mark about what we just talked about, rather than being specific, in terms of plotting out areas on a map. Would it be enough to say, we can make changes to our ordinances that would allow more flexibility in terms of housing? And I think, Mark, you said something about the more specific you can be in terms of,
I'm going to make a statement,
okay,
and I've done this for 45 years. And if you put very general motherhood and apple pie statements in the comprehensive plan, nothing will ever happen, period. Because the same issues that you're trying to resolve now will be kicked down the road to some other group to try and deal with individually. And I really firmly believe that. And I think there may be too much specificity in terms of some things. But if there's not a clear direction that some future committee can look at the plan and say, this is what they told us to do, the whole thing will get fought over again.
Mr. Chair, I understand what Mark is saying, and in part to that end, one of the things I heard over and over again from people at the meetings, just talking amongst themselves and on the floor, was that they like things the way they are. And so, why do we have to create a comprehensive plan that just completely upends everything and sort of charts a new course? Why can't we just say, things are pretty good where they are? And we're gonna leave things as much as we can as they are and improve where we need to improve and protect where we need to improve.
yeah, but that's the rub. I mean, some people say that an area that we need to improve is in housing, in
Yeah.
making housing more available.
You think this town looks like, I grew up in the 50s and 60s. You think the town looks what I grew up,
Not at all,
you know?
not at all.
I don't recognize anything or anybody. But I also realized we still need an opportunity, for families to get into this town.
Agree. Exactly.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But how do we we can't legislate that.
We cannot, but when the whole thing started, we have town-owned lands. If you get affordable housing, say, John Hodge, for instance, you give the land to John Hodge. Town, you vote, town votes it. It's kind of like, just like Hamilton Place.
John will be the first to tell you that it's not affordable.
Yeah, well, we call it attainable now.
Or attainable, whatever you want to call it.
And if you look what just happened in Madison, Maine, they just opened it up yesterday. They're rental units, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom rental units. It may not be affordable, but the rent could be affordable. And that seems to be Greenville's doing the same thing. They're doing big rental things. Kingfield turned it down for some reason, but other towns are doing it.
Look at the average income of those towns versus the average income of Harpswell.
Well, it's hard to
It's two
it's hard to
different
quantify the
demographics.
average income of Harpswell.
It's two different demographics,
Yeah.
though, you know what I mean?
Well, I know, well, you go to a Marine Resource Committee meeting, do the average income there, or you take the average income of this group. It's stark differences in town here.
It would be, in my opinion, it would be interesting to know, maybe the Affordable Housing Working Group knows this, what the median income is in Harpswell, and what's the price of the median home, and can the medium income person afford a median or under median?
We've kind of seen that through the community block grant programs, like sections of Cundy's Harbor are considered almost below the poverty level. That's why the Holbrook Foundation got some grants. Then oddly enough, just after I get on the board here, Oars of Bailey Allen were considered low income. So we got grants for Library Hall, Cedar Beach, the fire station. It's hard to figure what the median income in town of Harpswell is. It just, you get the retired folks move in here, The fishermen's salaries nowadays aren't what they were when I was growing up. You didn't see $1 million boats back in the day. So, I don't know how you'd ever figure out what a medium income is in Harpswell.
The census doesn't have that data?
We'll know when the new one comes out, but.
Yeah, I know it is dated.
If you say the median household income, it's about median, meaning half is more, half is less. The state says for 2024, it's about $87,000 or $89,000.
In Harpswell or in the state?
State.
In the state?
No, in Harpswell.
In Harpswell, 89.
Half own
Half is up,
above,
half left.
half is below. If you look at the average, it's significantly higher than that because one household that earns $500,000 offsets a lot of people that make $50,000. The answer to your question, Peter, is probably very clearly, depending upon how you measure how much of your income you're going to pay for housing. If you use, sort of the standard measures that say you're going to use 35% for all of your housing costs. If you were going to go out and buy your house today with the median household income and the median price of housing, you couldn't do it with 30% of your gross income plus property taxes plus utilities, et cetera.
So here we
And
are.
I think, hold on a minute, Amy. I think the other piece, and it's the one that at least is worthy of thinking about, is that as far as I'm aware, in the last 12 or 15 years that we've looked at the numbers, I don't think there has been any additions to the rental housing stock in the community. And I would venture that the availability of year-round rentals has decreased. If you can't buy, you can't move into town. and so I just, I agree with Amy, that I think everybody would like the Harpswell to stay the way it is. But
For who?
it's not gonna stay that way. And the,
Well,
You
for
know,
who is for the people who live here, who pay taxes here and who live here. Here we are, we have been trying to talk about what needs to change in the comp plan. We're coming right back to housing again. We're spending all of our time now talking about housing. I have this little teeny kitty book here that I started taking my notes on, and it's 6/16/22. Those are my first notes for the comp plan meeting. And we started to talk about housing, and we have never gotten off housing. We've never, it has run this plan. And maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't, I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot more that is important about Harpswell than housing, and I think Matt is exactly right. The market is an immovable force, and I just want to say for the record, I've lived in Maine for 40 years. I came up here with a higher education. I could not find any place to rent in Brunswick because BIW people were all making way more than I made as a public servant. I had to go live out in Richmond. That's where I bought my first house, was in Richmond. I mean, I didn't buy a house for a long time. I rented, I drove a half an hour to get to where I worked, and that was okay. You know, I had a roof over my head, and I was okay with it. But I have to say, I'm not in full support of the idea that if you work here, you deserve to live here. Because I just don't think that's realistic, and it's not possible, and it's not what happens in so many other places. It's just not what happens. So I don't think we want big McMansions, but we also don't want quarter-acre lots. We want something in between, and we're not there yet. We're just not there yet.
Okay, so, yes,
I'd
George.
like to read a comment real quick that, after talking with some people after our meetings. Oh man, I got a few here, but one that sticks out to me. One goal of the comprehensive plan is to maintain the integrity of the rural character of Harpswell. Ordinances have been put in place to do just that. If the town is out of land or space under these already existing ordinances, the ordinances should not be changed to create opportunity for development when the ordinances were originally created to protect the land. Basically, what we're talking about.
Okay, so there are several other things that I want to get to before the meeting ends tonight. But I guess, in recognizing Amy's comment, I agree. Housing has taken a lion's share of what we're talking about. There's a lot more that is in this plan. Getting back to my point, I believe that reorganizing the way this is presented will help folks understand that housing is not necessarily, it's important, but it's not necessarily the number one thing.
That goes exactly against my very first comment, where I said we're providing the same information in a different order or trying to sell it a different way. If that's the way the committee wants to go, that's fine, but it won't pass. People are smart enough to read it and say, nothing's changed here, it's just written differently. Need to make the changes or it won't pass, so that's,
Okay, so, all right.
I would submit, though, we probably could have done a better job of illustrating what we're trying to do. We chose a path that turned out not to work because we were sort of picking an area, in my mind, setting those people apart from the rest of the town to do what we needed to have done. I suggest that if we were to keep what we have now, the interior area, and still address the needs of having housing by means of some changes to the ordinance, because the people still want, older people want to be able to stay here, and having the ADUs now, and renting would give us some rentals, but we're not taking any section of town and saying it's we're gonna do it all in your area. And also showing some pictures. I know that the
Visual.
affordable housing is gonna do it, but if you drive from Brunswick, I did this last week, you drive from Brunswick down Route 24, and you start at Cook's Corner, and you're looking at all that development, and somebody mentions attainable housing, that's what you see, instead of something that would be more in keeping with a rural, atmosphere.
Also, I'd say that before tonight, tonight's the first time I've heard from the committee, or from, you mentioned it, ADUs and use of existing buildings. And I think you're on the right path there. I think that would be more realistic and more of an easy sell
Yeah.
than new development.
Come to the public hearing before the planning board tomorrow night
Right.
for the ordinance amendment to allow
Yeah,
that.
George, I'll be there.
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Okay,
Sorry.
so let me, we started this conversation about taking a look at the comments that we've got from the last four meetings that we've had with the public. They cover a wide swath of things. A lot of them are focused on housing, and a lot of them, quite frankly, reflect concern over pursuing everything that the Attainable Housing Working Group wants to propose in terms of smaller houses and smaller lots and so on and so forth. I think we can maybe capture a couple of things there and highlight those, and then, put the discussion about smaller housing, duplexes, and so on and so forth, after we get more information about water and so on and so forth. In other words, I'll be frank, kick that can down the road a little bit. Because I think what I've seen in my time on the planning board, there were three things: 40,000 square foot lots, which Amy talked about, 80,000 square foot lots for subdivisions, and 20,000 square foot lots for workforce housing. That's in our ordinance. There's been no workforce housing built since Hamilton Place. So, what that says to me is that the land is precious, it's not in great abundance, it's valuable, and that in and of itself is gonna hamper a lot of development, if you will, in those smaller lots. Just,
Yeah, Al, I thought what happened there, again, sitting now next to a 12-house subdivision, some of those people could not get a builder within 30 miles of Brunswick. One guy had to go to Turner to get a crew. And as Bob said on the housing committee, if your option is to build these big houses, and there was an incredible, influx over the past 15 years or so of people who wanted that, that's what you're going to do as a contractor. And somebody says, well, I got this 20,000 square foot, can you build me a house for $80,000 or $120 or whatever? No, I'm busy. That's what's gonna happen.
I think we have to step back. Housing keeps coming up because in fact it defines the character of this community.
It's part
And
of-
that's one thing. And I believe that, and I hope there was a consensus on this, that our goal for Harpswell is a mixed community. We don't want this to become, it is not just, what's funny, we think it's all retirees, which describes this committee in many ways, not entirely.
Who let
It's
you
not
in?
gonna be, I think that the wave that's gonna hit us is not retirees. We're gonna become a bedroom community for people who are gonna start commuting to Boston and to Portland and so on. if we, Matt, if we let the free market, if we just despair that we can't mess with the free market, Amy and Matt, we both said, oh, it's too big. Well, the very nature of what we're doing is messing with the free market. You wouldn't have a plan. The free market will take care of everything if you just step back. You don't need a plan. Absolutely don't need a plan. And we could fire our code enforcement. Get rid of the code enforcement division. That's all intervening with the free market. It's all intervention. And so the question is, how do you intervene to accomplish what you want in the least destructive way? And so I'm not pessimistic that you can't fight the free market. We have to fight the free market, or we will become a bedroom community and retirement community.
We've done
The
okay.
one- The one
Oh, I'm
last
sorry.
thing, no, this is the one last thing I want to say. So I think we ought to articulate what we want to see. And if we want to see a monoculture of retirees and commuters, then we should say it. And the free market will provide it. It will. There's no question about it. Or if we want to say we would like to see a mix, then we're going to have to figure out how to do that. And I don't think we have the brains to do that in this room or in this committee right now over even
would have done it.
time, but we should set in motion a mechanism to have it happen.
That language is in the plan, in the vision statement, about having a mixed community that supports one another and
Yeah.
neighbors help neighbors, et cetera.
We need to emphasize it, yeah.
Mark?
Now, let me make a suggestion about the housing piece. The Affordable Housing Working Group is not deaf. They have heard the comments. They have started to discuss how they should respond to them, what changes should be made. They're meeting tomorrow to look at the feedback. They've each taken all of the recommendations, each member, and looked at them, except for Kevin, because he's not really a member. They've all gone through and said, here's what we heard, here's what we think we should do or not do. They will meet tomorrow to start the process of going through that. And they will, in all likelihood, I'm going to use the word significantly, revise the proposals and what have you. So I think the process with respect to that should be to let the Affordable Housing Working Group do its review of its proposals and bring them back to you, and then the two of you, the two groups, sit down and see if there still are remaining issues. And I think that's an important part of the process.
Fair enough.
May I just say one more thing?
Good point.
I am not against affordable housing, and I am feeling a little bit like,
I'm sorry to do this to you.
that's
I
okay.
hear what
I'm
you're saying.
feeling a little bit like wanting to protect rural character, which is really important to me, is somehow seen as being.
Define it,
Pardon me?
define it.
Rural character? Well, that, just to that point, I actually asked this committee if we could sit down and define rural character. I asked for it, and I was shot down. I asked
I'm asking you
for,
to
I think
define.
we should do that. I think that's something that we should do.
I
think
know what,
this-
I know what I think the rural character is.
Well, but I think we should do that. I think that would be a service to this task force
Okay.
and a service to the town for us to sit down, and we're intelligent people. We can figure this out together.
You're right, Amy, because that's something that we should have in the definition.
We should.
Because all of us, many of us probably have a very different idea of what rural character is.
So let's not be afraid of it.
No.
Let's talk about it. I'm totally up for that. I'm not saying that my definition is the only one, but I am saying there are a lot of people who say they want to keep Harpswell's rural character. And I think that we do a disservice to both the affordable housing folks and those who want to protect rural character by saying you're in either camp or another camp. I think we need to combine forces and work together, but not disparage those who really think that rural character is high on the list, which I do, as being exclusive or not caring about people. I really, I have sensed that from some people on this committee, and you can have your personal views, but that's not what I am. So I just want to put that on the table.
Okay.
Let's put that on the agenda. Let's put some time aside in the next
Yeah,
agenda
let's do that.
explicitly
All
for
right.
that.
Okay. So we've had a good discussion about feedback from the community. We've had 4 meetings since mid-late March. And I want to move on, because the next several things are pragmatic things that we have to do. First of all, this effort was supposed to end in March 2025 at town meeting.
24.
24. We've exceeded that. So the question is,
You just answered your own question.
how long, obviously, we need to work on the future land use plan. We need to wrestle with some of the things we've talked about today. How long do you think is a reasonable timeline to get to where we need to go? I have some opinions, but go ahead.
So on the timeline, I think what we need to do is treat this like a project plan. What are the specific things we need to do? Talking about rural character is one. We can make a list of 2 or 3 or 4 things. We can estimate how long they're going to take, and we can derive a schedule based on the work that we see. I would also be very, very relentless about making sure we were only working on the high priority contentious issues, so we don't just make an infinitely long work list.
Yeah.
Then we can come up with a schedule, and I think that would be the way to do it, because if we just sort of say, if we're not specific about it, it'll be hard to hit a schedule.
Okay, just be advised. View sheds, the money going to view shed is gone. So what the select board needs to get from us is our feeling about how long we think it's gonna take to bring this to a conclusion, so that they can make decisions about, do we wanna continue to pay the consultant? If so, how much? I have seen estimates, an estimate that would take us through March 2025 for a boat. And I also have, also on the table is the possibility of having a vote in November. But I don't think we're gonna get to where we need to be by November, and March 2025 is actually not that far away from
Correct.
November 2024. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, if the select board were to ask me today, I think the end date should be town meeting 2025. I think we need to look at the issues that Peter was talking about and try to have those reconciled by the end of the year, November, December 2024. And then I think we have an opportunity to submit the plan to the state for a review. Just, here's what we come up with. You think this is gonna fit all, meet all the requirements? That gives you several months to get feedback from the state. And so that hopefully if the state comes back and says, yeah, this looks good to us, what you've done, it will make the vote in March 2025 a lot easier, less contentious. I don't know. Does
Well-
that make sense to you?
Well, kind of what I'm thinking is, this group, without Judy and Madeline for a while, we can get our issues all worked out. Instead of them being in the room, let's, we're gonna need them at some point, but I think for the next few meetings, we get disagreements here and there, but let's try to get those worked out without, going to the well.
Okay.
That's what I was gonna suggest as well. Are we gonna continue to meet twice a month?
You
Like we
you
have-
would like to, that's.
Well, that was my
next
question. Is that the plan throughout the summer?
Well, I
to
mean,
continue on
I'm
that
gonna
schedule?
I'm gonna throw it out to you
If-
folks.
Well, realistically, frankly, you two are the only ones that have a job
Well, that's, I mean, it's fine with us. I mean,
Yeah,
or
but,
I
you
think
know.
we're kind of good with that. We only go to meetings like four
We
four
have-
nights a
we have
week
no
anyway, so it's not like it's a big deal.
I got like 3 other committees that I got.
But
When
I
are you
guess
gonna
that was
schedule
my
the
question.
culture committee?
I guess that was my question. If we're gonna meet twice a month, maybe we could cut you shed back to, you know, like the second meeting every month, after we work out our issues, like Kevin said.
I want this group to work out all our
Right.
issues before we.
Right.
I think-
Exactly.
Agree.
Why
I really-
pay them to have them
I-
sit here and listen to us
Exactly.
argue?
Yep.
Okay, with that said, do you want to meet twice a month or once a month?
Twice.
Right.
Okay.
Twice, and I really want to reinforce what Kevin says. I think we have to deal with some mega issues here, some
Yeah.
sort of high-level meta, high-level issues. Viewshed can't help us with that anyway. There's an awful lot of data on the table. We'll need some more surveys, and we'll call for them. But, so right now, I think you're entirely right, Kevin, that 2 or 3 meetings at least, we need to get our own grounding and get these questions. They can't help us on rural character.
No.
We got to help ourselves.
No, that's right.
I think we're surveyed to death.
Okay, so what would be an agreeable time to meet for the task force?
Back to our old schedule of second and fourth Wednesday, is that good?
Second and fourth Wednesday, that's the third, that's the
Evenings, like
Or,
Yeah,
6 to 8.
six-
or you could do every other Thursday, because that's when the select
I
board meets
can't
every
do
other.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I cannot do
The,
Thursday.
Is Wednesday?
Wednesdays?
the things about Wednesday, there are a lot of people, a lot of committees that meet on Wednesday.
Well, that's why we do Tuesday. How about Tuesday nights?
Tuesday's fine?
Tuesday's better?
Tuesday works.
Yeah,
Except the first
Yep,
Tuesday.
is that okay?
Yeah.
first
Tuesday?
Tuesday of the month.
No,
Good with me.
except
Okay.
Tuesday.
Oh, that's yours.
First
Second.
Tuesday of the month is R&S, second Tuesday of the month is energy and technology.
Oh, they meet in the small room, though.
Why not, I'm just saying.
Okay.
Okay, so if we met the second,
Second or fourth?
fourth Tuesday of every month, if we could make that work. is
Make
that-
what work, Al?
As long as
Second
we,
and fourth.
Okay.
second and fourth Tuesdays.
All right, I'll go in and try to make that happen.
At 6 o'clock?
All right, and then for the, for the next few meetings, we'll meet just as a group here without the consultant, because actually the consultants, as far as they're concerned,
They're
in
done
terms of
anyway.
payment and so on, they're,
They're working for
They're
free
out
now
and done.
anyway.
so, and the select board, one of the reasons I want to get into this is because I expect the select board to ask us to meet with them and say, what do you guys think? What timeline are you looking at, reasonable, so that they can make a decision about whether they want to and how much they want to give to the consultant.
Alan, could you produce for us, just send it around by email, reverse engineer, if the final decision is March 25, in terms of the time for the state to look at it, in terms of times for public meetings, just sort of reverse engineer that, because in a way, it's not like we have up until then to discuss this
No,
matter.
no.
So if you could help us with that, that would help.
Okay, all right.
At this point, we can kind of do a la carte thing with Judy and Madeline,
Yeah,
as we need them.
that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
I think as Matt said, it seems like the flood plan and attainable housing are the big deals, and stick us right now.
Well, I think when Jim and Courtney are done with the new attainable housing plan, it might be whittled down enough to.
Yeah.
Is to think about being as, simplifying those two issues as much as possible. So that it gives, Judy's information seemed to be, you needed to have for FLUP pretty specific information in order to pass,
Well,
or
remember now,
guaranteed to
the future
pass.
land use plan is a compilation of the things that the town thinks are important for the future. If it's housing, there needs to be an accommodation for whatever that solution is. If we're talking about,
I thought it was
things
business
like the working
oriented.
waterfront, obviously, the working waterfront, we have a huge issue now that was not on the table when we started this, and that is, rebuilding, if you will, refurbishing our working waterfront. And so, you know, that's a huge issue for the town. And then there's all the issues about the environment and things like, things that Amy was touching on before. So, and all of that has to be reflected ultimately in the future land use plan. All these things feed the future land use plan. So they're connected in a very real way.
You know, one of the bigger things, it's bigger than any of it, is our EMS system and fire departments. In the
Because,
next-
I mean, yeah,
In the next 10 years, where do you think our money's going? You know, we're meeting with an architect tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. And if we're looking at building a central EMS facility here, that's millions and millions of dollars for this town.
But, you know,
Can we put affordable housing on top of the penthouse
Built, yeah, things like that.
I apologize.
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay, so we're gonna go twice a month, starting in June. Second and fourth Tuesdays, 6 o'clock. We will meet for the foreseeable future as this group. We'll work on things that we discussed here, as well as things that were brought up, like rural character and so on. To me, rural character means a place where a higher priority is given to open space rather than structures, buildings. And, in addition, rural character is tied to the things that this town has done for decades, maybe centuries, like fishing,
Well,
farming, things like that.
George and I were at the parade yesterday. See, but when I think of rural character, maybe I think of things like that. You know, we had a fundraiser for the Lobsterman last year. You know, 200 people showed up. You know, but when I try to think in your mind what rural character is. Then I was thinking about the parade George and I were at yesterday. You know,
I completely agree with that. It's where the community is cohesive enough and small enough that you can know your neighbor, you know somebody else who knows your neighbor. When it gets to be too big, it's like, it's just anonymous. And so that's something that I think every person I talk to loves about Harpswell. And I think rural character is what George said. It's, you know, I love my neighbor, but I can't see my neighbor. That's rural character. We talk
don't like them
about
all.
housing being such an important thing. Well, maybe there's spaces where there's not housing, you know? So it's both sides of the coin,
Okay.
you know?
So let me
Quiet.
touch
Dark
one other
skies.
thing that I think is important and that we heard from the feedback that we got, and that deals with outreach. Outreach has been an issue that we've wrestled with for a long time, and it's not only involving us as a comprehensive plan task force. The town is wrestling with this, and I recall at one of the last select board meetings that they're talking about maybe hiring somebody to enhance communication in the town. I don't know if that.
yeah, we have somebody.
You've already done it, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we need to tap into that asset and help us in the months that we have ahead, improve our outreach to make sure we're touching base with as many people as we possibly can. And I know that I've been approached by the anchor. Actually, it was as a result of something that either you said or somebody in the meeting that we had several months ago about putting the plan in smaller segments and so on. And I'm trying to work out something with the anchor where we will have, on a monthly basis, part of the plan in print that they can read. Now, obviously, they said, well, let's start with the future land use plan. We can't do that because, but maybe segments of the plan that we have here that seem pretty straightforward, we can start putting in the anchor as sort of special additions or features in the
Maybe the
anchor.
headline should say that we're don't get discouraged, because we didn't start with future land use. We're confident that this
Yeah.
is solid, so let's start here and
Yeah, we're gonna
work our
start
way
with-
up to the more controversial.
So which brings me to, so I'm gonna say my final point, because I want to get out of here. I've said no later than 7:30. I really think we're gonna need somebody to kind of bird dog this outreach thing for the task force. I've been writing articles every once in a while. I know when we started this thing, Monique Coombs took the bull by the horns and was involved with
Did a good
outreach,
job.
did some articles and so on. I really think we need to have one or two people focused on outreach, making sure articles are done on time with the anchor, they have to be done by the middle of the month. Have to go through Christie at least for a sanity check. And I mean, I've done small things in the last several months, but I really would like to have some help, especially since outreach is gonna be an important part of what we do.
Kevin said that you found, the select board has found somebody.
Yeah, they're not gonna do that.
Huh?
It's a lot to ask them to do that.
Well, if outreach is their job, this is important outreach.
Yeah.
Well, outreach, we always use this broad term, but something Amy brought up a long time ago was we should be going out and talking to people one-on-one. I suggest that we continue to do that, but maybe we need to put a cohesive group together to talk about different parts of outreach. Who's gonna who writes well, who can handle writing for the anchor? And
Maybe, to your point, we could, instead of having one or two people all the time, someone could just take notes, like in a different person each time, and then just submit the notes in a 2-paragraph thing. This is what we did this week at the comp plan thing. And each person could take a turn and just submit it to the anchor, weekly update. The other thing I wanted to ask is, are we going to be able to have Zoom calling so that we could have a meeting and somebody could go
That's Peter.
on?
That's Peter.
Okay, so someone could could be watching the meeting on Zoom and call in and ask us a question while we're in our meeting. And we would answer that question, because if you could do that, you would create a show people would want to watch, because somebody would want to call in and ask a question. And if other people would want to hear what the answer is.
So we have the capability to do hybrid meetings. That would be announcing that the meeting was available for anyone to participate in, which we could decide to do. We're getting up to
When is
speed
the
on that.
comms person actually gonna come on board, or is that person already on board?
A week or two, they're in Italy.
What's that?
A week or two, he's in Italy right now.
Italy.
Watch the comp plan
Yeah.
meetings.
We give him a signing
Call
bonus.
in.
Okay, so maybe by middle, end of next month?
I think so.
Well, so
Has the statement of work or whatever been put together?
Yeah.
now I'm the
Peter?
only trained.
Yeah, I know.
Let me go to Amy's question. And if I understand the situation correctly, the town has the capability to do hybrid meetings.
yes.
At this point, staffing is still problematic.
We're training people up, but we haven't got many people trained up, like,
Because,
Two.
I mean, you may
They're both on the committee.
remember the old days of Zoom bombing and what have you. That did happen with a Zoom meeting not too long ago. And soon as the public, quote unquote, public knows that there might be open access to get in and do crazy things that happen. So it's two parts. It's having the technology and having somebody who comes in and spends 2.5 hours or 3 hours setting up and doing stuff other than Peter
and Mary Ann.
and Mary Ann.
Yeah.
Because Mary Ann's on the committee and Peter's on the committee.
So we're getting there, but a lot of things are buzzing around here. We could do that. So what was it that you said? Oh, so the communications person, they're not going to produce content from our committee. They're going to be the kind of people that sticks content on the web or puts it on the Facebook account
And
or
reminds people,
maybe reminds people, but we're going to be, like every committee, I think, would be responsible for generating their own comment. And I think the bird dogging is to make sure we're doing that. You know, somebody does it for whatever, like Amy's idea is a good one, right?
that's an important distinction. We're responsible for the content, but a communications person can weave it together, say, here are the points of contact, here are the points where you've got to be, this is deadlines and so on.
Yeah.
Can manage us, but we got to do the content.
Okay, so, yeah, I was very interested, one of the comments that were made in the feedback that was in the report that we received, there was a question about when we were meeting at Kellogg Church, how was this meeting announced? Where'd this come from? And I thought that was very interesting, because we had a pretty big turnout there. And so I'm saying to myself, what was the basis of that communication comment?
Postcards.
If we had, the postcards made a difference.
Well, I'm guessing, I mean, the town mailed postcards to,
Yeah.
I don't know, a couple hundred people, and
But obviously, if we want to, even if we want to look at 2025, March 2025, we need to link up with the public so that we don't hear, I didn't know what the hell was going on, I didn't know what was happening here, where'd this come from? You know, things like that blow me away a little
Yeah.
The
bit.
unique thing about Harpswell is there's only two ways to get in and out of it if you don't have a boat. And there's two roads. I think the town should look into, as a broader issue, very nicely aesthetically pleasing display boards, large ones, where weekly events like public meetings, because everybody, if you had a display board and you just saw it as you're coming down 123 or 24, and there it is, and so on, I think that would do a great deal, and it would be all sorts of stuff, like there's a nature walk here, and the recreation softball game is going to be here. To do community events, just continually rolling through those on some sort of electronics, it costs money, but I think in fact it would help to knit this community together with a common agenda.
Okay.
That's it. Just,
Yes, sir.
I think making use of existing systems is worth doing rather than creating new ones. And the anchor goes to every mailbox in town, and it gets sent to a lot of people who are non-resident.
Yeah.
So I think if we, each month, have an article in the anchor that says, here's what we're thinking about now, and here's what we'd like feedback on, we're likely to get more, we won't get Zoom bombed.
We
I also
That
think,
way.
let me just jump in here, I also think that the Anchor puts content up on their website more
Yes.
frequently
Yeah.
than the paper, and they also get a lot of hits on their website, I guess, so that would be something we should bird dog as well.
And we also could all write letters to the editor. On a if you have a particular topic. And what is it, Invisibles runs meetings on how to write these type of letters.
The golden rule, though, is if you go that route, make sure,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, can we make sure that we have committee agreement
Well,
about the
make
topic
sure
before we
that-
start?
And we're not doing it
town
from
staff
a.
is aware of it so that we're not.
Oh, yeah. That, plus you're doing it as you're an individual.
So I had one other idea, maybe this is crazy, maybe not, I'll just put it out there. So if we're gonna meet the second Tuesday and the fourth Tuesday of the month, could we say that we're gonna have like open hour drop-in Saturday morning in this room on the second Saturday and the fourth Saturday of every month for a couple of hours? And just have a couple of us here, so that if people wanted to stop by and talk or learn more, or had questions, they could actually talk to us.
Is the facility even open on a Saturday? I don't think so.
The cleaners are here.
Sitting under the front porch.
What's that?
We can sit next to the
Yeah.
Eggman at the dump.
Well, or someplace where they know that we're always gonna be at such and such a place on such and such a time if they wanna talk to us.
Okay, let's think about it.
Yeah. Hey, Peter?
Let's test it, try it.
One of.
Nobody
one of-
comes, we stop. Pile of people come.
That's what I want to do with my Saturday in the summertime.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I thought, I wanted to know if we could do Zoom calling, as, you know, live Zooming, was that if we could take the last 10 minutes of every meeting that we have and have a call-in. So if somebody's watching live what's going on, we could open up the phones, and if somebody wanted to call in after watching us live time, we could answer questions for 10 minutes, you know, after each meeting. It's just something to think about.
Are we
Yes.
broadcasting all of these?
We would, if we're broadcasting, my sense is, you have to clear that with the TV station, they have to be there, and they're not normally there.
Something
We could
to
look
think
into it.
about.
Unless we're doing the stream.
All right, based on what we've said, then the next meeting, our next meeting is going to be June 11th at 6 PM. It's the second Tuesday in June.
Hot damn.
And then the 25th
And then the 25th?
at 6 PM. And then we'll proceed from there, second and fourth Tuesdays at 6. And I'll try to get that cleared with the powers that be to make sure that we have that slice of time available to us. Okay, we've talked about a lot of things tonight. I think we've made some progress, and like I said, let's keep things in perspective. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Al, are you gonna give out a homework assignment?
Well,
And let me tell you why I say that.
all right,
I think it's important that each member of the task force go through the goals, policy, strategy section and say, are there things in here that I'm not comfortable with, that isn't there,
Pick that up and talk, okay.
that isn't there? Because obviously tonight, 2 or 3 things came up, but as people go back and look at, you know, public safety, nobody tonight other than Kevin said, boy, what about public safety and the looming costs of doing stuff? I just think if you're going to do a review of the plan, the Affordable Housing Working Group will look at that, look at the land use plan. You know, to me, you know, a fundamental question that goes back, I think probably at least 2 prior versions of the plan is everything in the interior the same? Or should it be treated differently? Not what the specifics are, but, you know, you go to Cundy's Harbor, probably 80% of the existing lots are non-conforming. You go to Lower Oars Island, probably 100% of the lots are non-conforming. People can't do things, they can't make changes, they can't do things. Same thing if you go to the lot of the next, you go to South Harpswell, and, you know, so to me, to think in the broad picture is currently the town's ordinances treat everything in the interior district the same. You can do everything, same rules, same whatever, yet the reality is that the existing environment is different. Does that need to be recognized? I think that's a first question that you all need to answer, because if the answer is no, then it's pretty simple in terms of the future land use plan.
Could I suggest, Alan, that you go through the chapters in the plan, pick one of the more non-controversial, low-key chapters, and put it on the agenda for our next meeting. And the first 15 minutes of the meeting will be a session to discuss that. And everybody will be told in advance what it is and expected to come prepared to say, this is great, or I don't like this. And then the first 15 minutes of every meeting, pick a chapter, and let's start with an easy one.
Oh, I say we jump into interior zoning. Let's just get it over.
In 15 minutes?
I'm going to peel off the Band-Aid.
Well, there's 1 minute for each person.
No, well, I'm saying we get by that, but it's easy street.
No, but what Mark mentioned brought some good points, I think, that we could, as individuals, start looking into the interior zone. And it would help us learn a little bit more how the ordinances is treating other than people on the planning board. And you don't really see that much in the interior zone because they don't go to the planning board. right?
No, they have no reason to.
So,
Right. All right. As far as an assignment, I think looking at goals, policies, strategies is a good,
yeah.
let's look at that. I will try to select a chapter or two, chapter for us to focus on for the next meeting, 11th of June. I'll also put together, I will take it upon myself to put together an article for the anchor and try to work out some sort of a schedule with them in terms of breaking this up. I think the last thing ultimately we're probably going to do is future land use, since I think obviously there's a lot going on there with a lot we have to kind of mesh together and see if that works. Does anybody have anything else that we need to focus on right now? Okay, and we'll continue to meet as a group without consultants for the next foreseeable future until we feel as though we need to bring them back in.
Yep.
Good.
And we are going to need some help.
Yep.
Yep.
And no question about it, so just,
Wait till we need help.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, and I guess the final thing is that I would expect that, when is your next select board meeting?
A week from Thursday.
Okay, so do you think it's reasonable that they would want somebody to come and talk to them about where we are, or you think that's,
Let's wait a bit.
all right, that's good, fine with me?
Let's get another one of these meetings under our belt.
Okay. All right, any other questions or comments or suggestions? All right, meeting adjourned.